Okay, hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Caffeine Fueled Ventures and to the first episode of CFV News. I've given us an acronym there, Jake. We are CFV News.
Wow.
So each month we're hoping to do one of these, so let us know if you kind of enjoy it. But the idea is we're going to sort of round up a couple of bits of news that Jake and I find kind of interesting, that basically impacts entrepreneurs and small business. So it might not necessarily be a business-related piece of news. It could be actually a piece of news on anything, but we feel like it has a bit of a business angle. It's just sort of interesting in this kind of business sphere that we're in. So anyway, sort of buckle up, enjoy this one. And actually, I think it's over to myself for the first piece of news. So without much further chitter-chatter, my first piece of news. Are you ready for this, mate?
I'm so ready. I'm pumped because I think the one thing that we should add here before we crack in, as a general rule, not always 100% clean, but they are going to be relatively blind reactions, right? So, I won't necessarily know your story, and you won't necessarily know my story before we throw it out. So, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, 100%, dude. Like I've opened the tab, so as you guys are going to see, like I've got some tabs open to kind of give you some visuals. But although I know roughly the area, I don't know what Jake's take is, and what the actual piece of news that Jake's revealing to me. So yeah, these are going to be hot takes. So expect us to maybe not be as scripted as we normally are. Not that we're scripted, but not as following a kind of a pattern. So let's just see how it goes. So over to my first piece of news, which is. Actually, I've combined two pieces of news here. So the first one I'm not actually going to share anything for, and I'll share something for the next one. So the first piece of news is that Etsy has purchased Depop for $1.625 billion. So essentially a lot of money, a lot of cash. And the reason, and I'll go into in a second kind of why I've brought this bit of news up. But the other thing you should kind of know, if you're anything like me and Jake, you're a bit trendier than me, so you probably already know about this. But the Depop app essentially is an app where you can go and buy clothes from other people. So it's not necessarily shops, but it's like buying clothes. Imagine a little bit like a Gumtree, but a bit more upmarket. People kind of actually like style the clothes out, and they're like quite nice pictures and stuff like that. And they do a lot of customizations and stuff. But it's this huge, it's massive, right? It's got a younger audience, I think. But it's really, really big, and basically it's where guys go and get their clothes nowadays. So, that's that one, and I'll explain it all in a little bit. But the second bit that I'm rolling into this is the Netflix.Shop. Have you heard about this one, mate?
No, I had not heard about Netflix getting into a merch. What is that?
So this is real interesting, right? So I'm sharing with you right now what the website kind of looks like. But essentially, they've gone in and they're getting properly into merch. It's inspired by essentially some of their Netflix original series.
Okay.
So it's essentially they're kind of coming out with these designs. They're really kind of like I don't know. I would say off the wall from what you would assume standard merch is. They've kind of taken merch and they've stepped it up a level. So I'll tell you why I've kind of chosen these two bits of news, right? What I'm seeing, and I'm noticing this all the time with different things, is that companies are switching their focus a lot more to the kind of Gen Z audience. So that kind of, that audience of people that are kind of that will probably be teenagers around about now, all the way through to like early 20s, like 21, something like that. And these guys are starting to get money now. These guys are starting to work. They're starting to get their own forms of income. So I think they're becoming more of an attractive audience to companies. And I'm really starting to see this switch in focus to a really kind of modern and fresh take on business. If you look at what Netflix is doing here, their merch isn't necessarily like standard t-shirt with like whatever their series is. I think of a Netflix series. Tell me a Netflix series, man.
What, Netflix?
Sorry, you're on the spot.
Damn, you are. Well, maybe not even not a Netflix original, but possibly the biggest thing Netflix has ever picked up and blown up. Money Heist. They've absolutely has, blown it up.
Perfect. So Money Heist, right? So say you would think if Netflix was going to do some merch, they were going to do a Money Heist merch, they'd literally get a t-shirt, right, stick Money Heist on the front of it, or maybe just put like a picture of one of the characters on the front. This here, they're kind of going like one level deeper than that. They're taking like design aspects from it, but actually kind of they're just making it a little bit more kind of I don't know, branded to that genre and the type of people that might want to that kind of consume that content. So yeah, anyway, I think this is just such an an awesome kind of new take on business. They're really looking at going down to hitting those Gen Zs, across what this is happening here, but also if you look at Etsy with Depop, they're really picking up on that. Okay, these guys have got money now. This is the way they shop. It's a little bit different. It's got a more sustainable edge to it, but it's also got this like much more customized, much more personalized kind of aspect. I don't know, Jake, if you'll remember, but like when I was younger, certainly when you were younger as well, you're a little bit younger than me, but like you really only had like 3 different styles you could choose. You could be like a surfer, you could be like a goth or an emo, or you could be a townie. I think that was the term for it. But like there wasn't really like much flexibility. Like everyone had the same kind of stuff. But now I don't think there is a genre. Like people are wanting to be so much more customized and so much more individualized, and that's really a trend that I'm starting to see.
Mate, that's a really good thing to pick up on, actually. Like, do you know what? Like, you look back to when we were younger, and I know you joke about me being slightly younger. There's not enough in it for it to be a real thing. I agree. You were very much one of those, and typically, what you were was determined based, or what you were determined where you shopped, right? So quite often Top Man, for example, was a high street shop, dressed people very much in a similar way, and most people, that were top men, or whatever, were top men people, or as you say, you've got Superdry, you've got Fat Face. There are all these different types of shops, but essentially the type of shop you ended up shopping in was what I suppose not defined you, because nobody is defined by their clothes, but that kind of very much fit the personality that the person was going for. So I definitely agree. Whereas we've moved towards where, because of the boom in online shopping, and I would argue a boom to embrace the nerd within ourselves, whether that be being a nerd for Star Wars or a nerd for whatever, it doesn't really matter. A nerd for your particular love. I think we are seeing a real kind of change in the way your companies are going after consumers. I think it's a really good spot.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. Actually, it presents a really awesome opportunity for people. I think you're right. Like I think we were a product of the available shopping experiences around us. And I think, we've been talking custom, custom's been around for a while, right? In terms of like, everyone knows people want personalized stuff. I mean, that really started to boom when you had companies like Not on the High Street and, pick your favorite customization type, website. Like that boom's kind of already happened, but it's almost like one layer on top of that, where it's like they want the customization, but it's also got to be stylish across loads of different things. So it's like you need you need to amp up those variables. Like if you can have something where you can choose, not just the writing on the front, but the font and the color. I'm just making this up on the spot, but really give that finite amount of choice. I think that's really where the opportunity is now.
Yeah, 100%, dude. And I think the Depop piece is so interesting. It's definitely a younger audience. It's not something I'm into or necessarily ever been really that exposed to. I've seen it. I know what it's all about. It's never a place I've tried to purchase clothes from. But it's weird if you think, as you say, you kind of alluded to it being like a Gumtree or like an eBay or a new version of that. And there were a huge rise of those a couple of years back, right? You've got Depop, you've got Shop. That was another one, but that wasn't focused on clothes. That was focused on, just things again. But like that went for, taking that Gumtree style of selling to someone else, trying to give things a second life, and tried to upmarket, which is what Depop has done. So yeah, I think it's really interesting, man.
Yes, we'll see. We'll watch this space. I think it'll be really interesting to see what Etsy ends up doing with Depop. Do they leave it alone? Do they? It's the thing, right? We see this quite often. You see already large established corporates kind of taking purchasing companies, and then they mess with that original thing, that thing that really like got people onto it. And you take I know it's a really obvious one, but you take Instagram and you see what Facebook ended up doing to Instagram, and it just, although it's still extremely it's incredibly successful, it's not what it was. It's gone a completely different direction. So anyway, we'll watch this space for the Depop and Etsy relationship. But yeah, man, I was thinking what we'll do is we'll hop over to your next piece of news, if you like.
Yes, dude. Love that. So, my news. Now, Rory, as you say, you will have possibly have seen this as you were pulling the article up. But for me, I wanted to hit a piece of news. Now, obviously, this is a couple weeks back now. We are filming this like mid-June. This was written beginning of June, so a couple of weeks back. So apologies if this is old hat to some of you, but for me, I found this really interesting. Right, so the article comes out and basically talks about how Apple wants its employees back in the offices around 3 days a week from September. So there's a couple of things at play that I find really interesting there. The first one is we're talking September as if everybody knows exactly how the next 3 or 4 months are going to go. So I think it's really interesting for them to set a deadline or set some goals. I think everybody, you have to set goals, but it's pretty hard in the current climate. So I think that's interesting. The thing I find more interesting than that is this is what Apple have decided to do. Further down in the article, it talks about how there is different approaches across some of the big companies. So here, Apple say they want employees back in the office from September around 3 days a week. And, this is based on, leaked internal memos. So, if you work at Apple and that's not what you're being told, don't come at us. We're just reacting to the news we're seeing here. We don't work at Apple, so we can't tell you exactly what's coming from there. But based on this piece of news, I find this interesting. So Apple want employees back 3 days a week. You'll see further down, Google have basically come out with a policy where they are wanting people back in kind of in more of a full-time style capacity, back to the way of life pre-COVID, shall we call it, with one small change, and that change is that they are going to kind of enable like a 14-day allowance, shall we call it, for either working from home or working abroad, should you want to kind of, I suppose, have a holiday but like go and sit on the beach whilst working, I suppose would be the way that would be being positioned. So that's kind of one train of thought. Whilst on the other train of thought is the news that came last year when Facebook announced that they were kind of happy for people to kind of work from home forever. That's a broad statement. What that actually looks like in execution might be a different thing, but Twitter kind of came out and basically said the same thing. Employees can prepare to, work from home essentially, kind of going forward is kind of the way those two companies have positioned it. So, yeah, throwing it out to you. Mate, Rory, be interesting to get your reaction, man.
Mate, it's a really interesting piece of news, because we feel this every day, right? We've made no secrets about the fact that we both have full-time corporate jobs, and we're in a similar sort of our company is in this similar kind of situation where they have to the pandemic essentially brought up an issue that's been an issue for a long time, which is like this idea of flexibility at work. And I think it's really highlighted that people want to work in different ways. And because we were forced into the situation where we did just work from home full time, if you could work from home, I think most governments around the world were saying work from home, right? And it kind of it forced a test. It forced a test of like, does this work? Do our systems work? Can we manage? Are we still collaborative? There's always been this like fear, hasn't there, around working from home of like, I think anyway, this perceived fear of like truancyism and and sort of maybe lacking a little bit. I don't know, man. I think when I look at what it's been like working from home, I mean, ultimately my efficiency must have gone up 100% because you're not in an environment where you're being distracted by things that are other than the task at hand. I think it's really interesting that Apple's taken this stance of we want you back in the office. I know you were saying the article says 3 days a week, but that feels like more. Basically, they're saying more often than not. And yeah, I think that's a really interesting stance for Apple to take.
Isn't it, man? I think that's the interesting thing. It's not necessarily expecting people back. I think, post-COVID, whenever that be, you can make your own determinations on that. But I think post-COVID, what's interesting is, where are companies coming down? I would argue that, asking someone to be in the office, to the Google approach, perhaps all the time, or even going as far as, say, Apple and saying more often than not, it almost kind of, it doesn't spit in the face, but it kind of throws out almost like everything that the last year and a half has kind of delivered, right? As you say, there is this test of, what has always been considered a problem. And, we've spent a year and a half testing that and finding out how that goes. And the reason I find that super interesting is because I wonder if for these companies, how much of a difference it's going to make to their hiring going forward, right? So I did some research, and Apple is in a number of different metrics considered to be the 8th best company in the US to work for. So does this mean, if Apple are going to be asking this of their employees, that they're going to lose that 8th spot? Are they going to struggle? And whether they care about that is a different story. But are they going to fall out of the top 10 as a result of what they're asking from their employees? Because there are other articles that I could have brought up that talk about how people would rather leave their jobs than be back in the office 5 days a week. So there is a lot to kind of get your head around there, right, bud?
Yeah, I think completely, man. I mean, it's such a good point that you raised. Like, it's almost linking this idea of flexibility to being like an additional benefit of jobs, right? We're used to traditional benefits, your salary, obviously, but different corporate benefits like gym membership or company car or something, whatever it might be. But this is a benefit, right? Like, this is an ability to be flexible in where and how you work. And I think, what I really think this says about Apple, maybe I shouldn't be saying this out loud, but I think it's essentially saying that working from home doesn't work for the corporate culture of Apple. It's saying it works some of the time, but ultimately, more often than not, it doesn't work. We need you back in the office. Do you think similar?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's kind of what they're getting at. Like, they're trying to deliver that level of flexibility, and you can understand it for a number of these companies, right? Like, you look at Amazon, you look at, I'm pretty sure Apple are as well, and I think Google. They're all investing in new premises left and right. Some of them investing in very heavily in new premises. And, the reason you're doing that is because you want to either expand the workforce or you're trying to deliver a better environment for the workforce. So the last thing you want to hear is that the workforce want to work from home all the time, right? So I think to some extent they are kind of saying it's not working. And for me, the biggest piece of why that is so important to business, because we talk about how these companies within themselves can differentiate themselves, and how it does this policy put Apple's 8th best place in the US to work at risk. Who knows? To be honest, I think it would be hard to prove either way, because you're not necessarily collecting huge amounts of data on why people leave companies. But I think that would be really interesting. And the reason that gets more interesting is because when you merge these big companies together, and I'm talking, realistically in the corporate America space, I would argue that Amazon, Apple, Alphabet, so Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc., maybe 4 or 5 other big companies will be the ones that set the expectation. Now, the expectation for the whole of corporate America is kind of what I mean there, because in the grand scheme of things, yes, maybe in certain sectors there are obviously companies that turn more revenue than Apple, or some of these other companies, Amazon even, that is possible. But the problem is, if these companies, who are predominantly tech companies, aren't willing to give that level of flexibility, then you're not going to see that level of flexibility come from, say, investment banking. It's kind of my logic, right? That's where my head goes, is, for those style of businesses to move, and even small businesses to move in that direction, we need the big tech giants to move first. I don't know if you think the same.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, man. And like the thing that I've found really interesting is actually the cultural difference between what I would call the large US tech companies, or some of them anyway, because actually I think there's a very broad spectrum actually of some of them, like you mentioned, Facebook, right, said you can just work from home forever, but some large American tech companies, not necessarily essentially wanting their employees back in the office, versus some of the large UK companies. If you've been watching some of the news, just think of one off the top of my head, but Nationwide, for example, I know you just mentioned banking there. Nationwide, are going to be way more flexible going into the future, and that's a company that I would say is a very, from an outsider's perspective, right? I've never worked for Nationwide, but I would assume it is a very kind of set in its ways, traditional banking environment, British kind of company. So for them to kind of take that stance, I've been really interested to watch all these companies popping up, British companies in the news, and now my mind's kind of gone blank on them, but you could easily Google it, right? That are all coming out and saying, yeah, no, we're all for this increased flexibility. We think, it's really increased efficiencies, and, it's better on people's mental well-being. Mental health is actually, there's an argument either side. People saying actually not being around people is not good for your mental health, but yeah. So no, I love this one, man. Like thanks for bringing this one up. I think really it's really interesting for the business space. I think we just need to watch over the next few months how this one kind of starts to pan out as the world opens up slightly. So are you ready for the next piece, man?
Yeah, man, hit me with it.
Cool. Okay. So the next piece of news that I have, and like Jake mentioned, some of these pieces of news are a little bit older now, but this one really resonates with me, and the reason why I'm sharing this one is actually because of the ad that's come off of the back of this news. So as you can see, it's an older piece of news at this point, but I just think it's really interesting, the ethos that's kind of coming out of this. So what I'm going to try and do is play this, but what I'll try and do is get rid of the noise, because I want you guys to still be able to hear me, but I'll play it in the background. And while it's playing, I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on at the moment. So what you might have noticed in the news recently is that Apple have changed the way that their system works, the iOS system, so essentially the operating system that sits on your iPhone and your iPad, etc. And what they're doing now is they're giving consumers, so the device owner, the opportunity to tell the apps that they're using not to track their movement across other apps and across other services. And the reason why this is really, really interesting is because actually the way that most of these things work nowadays is that ads are delivered to you by companies understanding what it is that you're doing elsewhere. So, for example, you're on pick your favorite platform that's free. And by the way, if it's free, the reason it is free is because they're selling you, right? They're advertising to you. So, they're playing ads to you, and that's supporting the revenue for this for the particular platform you're on. But pick that particular platform, and they're essentially going to be getting the information from elsewhere on the web about what you're doing, what you're up to, what you like, what you dislike, where you are, in order to be able to serve you relevant ads. And the reason why this is really interesting is because Apple's playing really putting their cards on the table here. They're really saying, this is very much them taking the side of the consumer rather than the developer, if you think about it like that, and really kind of passing people's data back to them. And they're taking the stance that, it's wrong. We should know and have an active input into whether or not we're being tracked across the web. And I'll just say one more thing before I kind of get your take, mate, just to maybe just see what your thoughts are on this. So one school of thought is that actually this is a bad thing because ads that are being served to you have to be relevant in order for them to be effective. And you might think, well, I don't really care whether or not the ad's effective. Like, it's an ad, it's annoying. Well, think about it, right? That ad, that person that's paying for that ad in the background, so, XYZ's t-shirts is paying for an ad to come up on your thing. Well, they're only paying for that ad because there's a chance that you might purchase it. And the money that's going into that ad is going into funding the platform that you're using for free in the first place. So the less and less relevant your ads become over time, the less and less likely you are to purchase, and therefore the less amount that those people, those advertisers are going to be willing to pay to get onto that platform. So actually, over time, you're diminishing the value of that ad, which in turn diminishes the revenue going to that platform, which gives them less money to do what they're going to do. So yeah, man, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on kind of where this is going with this whole kind of, I think it touches on this kind of security ethos and this like people, really feeling that their data is valuable and it shouldn't be shared.
I'm going to have to take a deep breath for this one. This one's a biggie. Yeah, so I find this super interesting again. Great article to choose. Funny that we've gone to Apple ones back to back here. For me, I find this super interesting. I kind of like that Apple are taking the side of the consumer. I think that is, in today's modern world, actually relatively rare. I would argue a large number of, large corporations are, I wouldn't say soulless, that's possibly too harsh, but they're certainly not always putting the consumer first in, their overall strategy. So I do like it from that perspective. At the same time, I can definitely see from a business perspective, this does make things tricky, right? It's already hard enough to find a way to make ads work, worthwhile, whether that be Facebook or Google or Instagram, whatever it might be. It's already hard enough to do that with the data that those websites do have on individuals, right? When you're trying to target your product at a certain type of person or a certain, type of individual. Obviously, you're not targeting an individual, but you're targeting a group of people. That's already hard enough. And then I look at it, so that's kind of, we've got point A, which is I like Apple taking the consumer side. I've got point B that says, okay, well, it's hard, so actually from a business perspective or even a small business perspective, right, we take it from our perspective, this is going to make things tricky. It's already hard enough, you're fighting against these mega corps in some cases who have far bigger spending budgets to target those customers that maybe you're interested in as well. But then I flip it on the third point is, I think I said A, B, and so now we've got C, I suppose, not 1, 2, 3. But either way, my third issue with it is, as a human and as someone that gets hit with these ads, I've got to be honest, they drive me insane. Like, I have no issue with certain level of ads. I think maybe one of the bigger things would be, literally coming off the cuff here, I feel like websites across the web should be policed, or apps should be policed to the volume of traffic or the volume of ads they can use. They don't have, a targeted ad here and there. I was searching sofas, so they start hitting me with sofa ads. I don't think I have a huge issue with that. Like, ultimately, do I really care? If it helps me find a good sofa, then great. But I feel that the volume of ads should be perhaps what we police more. I don't want to, go to a website and 90% of the website is ads. That literally drives me insane. And it's even more annoying when you're talking game apps, say on your phone, right? After every time you complete a level, you are paying through, you are essentially paying through time, of having to watch another 30-second ad. And guess what? The way around that is to pay $4.99 or whatever to go ad free. I hate that methodology. I haven't got a problem that they're advertising to me, and I don't want to pay the $4.99. I don't like the fact that they hit me with an ad like every 30 seconds. So that's just my take. I've got three real kind of quorums, I suppose, dude.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to have to respond to that last one, because I think that's such an interesting point that you raised. Like, could you police the frequency in which you are hit with ads? Because when you think about the fundamental issue with ads, is all right, there's one thing, there's the annoyance of being hit with an ad loads of times, right? Especially when it's irrelevant, you just keep on getting. And the thing that's really funny for me is, right, me and my partner share our computer, our laptop, and we also share our iPad. So actually, I get hit real often with ads that are completely irrelevant to me, because they're actually they are completely relevant for my partner. So all right, they might be relevant for me if I'm thinking about gifting something to her, but ultimately they think that I'm her in some senses. So there's the annoying aspect, right? But there's the brainwash aspect. If you think about it, you're sat in your own echo chamber, constantly being shown something. Eventually, you like it. We decorated our kitchen during the pandemic. I'm actually, this part of my background is my new decorated kitchen, and what we realized was we were playing Kiss FM. So it's like I don't know if it's a global station, but certainly here in the UK, it's essentially quite a big kind of popular radio station, right? And they're playing this music, and I was like, God, because I use Apple Music, and I just kind of listen to the stuff that I like. And I was thinking, God, this like music for kids these days, it's terrible. It's really bad music. I've actually, some of those songs that whilst we were, decorating through the 3 or 4 days, they were played to me so many times that I've now got those songs on my phone and I listen to them because I think they're good. Because if you're played something enough times, you'll like it. And I think it's really interesting that you kind of raise this point of, well, can we just limit it? Can we say you're not allowed to brainwash people? It can only be if it's relevant to them in the first instance, perfect, all well and good. But you can't hit them again. You can hit them, you can hit them again a certain amount of time, because obviously, they might be sat on the train and they're not thinking about, their sofa purchase. Whereas when they're back home in front of sat on the sofa, but can we limit the amount that people get hit with it? So that's a great point you raise, man.
Yeah, I think some of that though comes down to the platform, or less the advertisers. I feel that's more on the platform. The advertisers are out there trying to make money, right? So I don't have a huge issue there. I just look at it like, in all honesty, if tomorrow I could click and get rid of ads globally, I think I probably would, because it just drives me insane. But the problem there is you get into a whole discussion over, and it's not a discussion we're going to do on a news podcast, consumerism as a whole, right? That's a whole consumerism issue. So I don't necessarily have an issue with them advertising or retargeting me. I get it, right? They're trying to push something at me. So if it's not relevant, that's on me to swipe it away or tell them I think it's an irrelevant ad. But the platforms, whether that be Facebook, Instagram, Google, whatever, they should only be allowed to have ads showing to you, 3 times a day, or do you know what I mean? Like it shouldn't be every 12th post in my feed, for crying out loud, or it shouldn't be every website is 60% ads. That's just my take though. So interesting.
Yeah. No, it's a good point, man. And there's just one more point that actually I wanted to go back to, which is the first point, around Apple taking the side of the consumer. I was thinking about it as you were saying it. Well, they can take the side of the consumer because the consumer's paying their bills. Like, they're not an advertising company fundamentally. They're getting paid because we're buying their product, mainly hardware, but I think actually their services like Apple Music and stuff like that is a huge contributor to their revenue. But when you think about it, what's going to be really interesting to see is what happens with Google, because Google can't take the same stance. They can't, because their model, they are paid by the advertisers, so they have to take the side of the advertiser. And maybe to the external, they have to, because of course you think you're their customer because you're going to google.com and you're searching XYZ. You're not their customer. You're their product. They're selling you. You're serving you up the ad, serving you up the result that you wanted. That doesn't pay them. That doesn't help them out. What helps them out is you clicking on an ad. So I'm going to be really interested to see what companies like Google, where their bread is buttered by the advertiser. What kind of stance they take over the kind of coming years. But yeah, man, I think we probably run a little long on this one. I think we got a little excited. I've really enjoyed this. So hopefully the rest of our audience have enjoyed this, and let us know what you think. But yeah, man, should we wrap it up there?
I think we wrap it up. The other article I've got will take another day. I think, as you say, we got a little excited. So let me close this out. So if you found this useful, maybe not a full knowledge podcast there, but if you found it interesting, might be a better way to look at that. Then the classic subscribe, follow on whatever platform you're on, whether it be YouTube or whether it be on your podcasting platform. We'd greatly appreciate it. At the same time, drop us some notes in the comments. We'd love to hear some feedback. As Rory said, episode 9, we are throwing these out at this stage to kind of see what you like, what you don't. If you didn't like the news podcast, if it's been your favorite so far, we'd love to hear that stuff. So please let us know. We will be rolling through these again. And lastly, if you like coffee, as we say every week, check us out. We are giving away a 15% discount for anyone that's coming from our podcast or our YouTube channel. So check it out and enjoy some good coffee. And until next time, later, guys.
Cheers, guys.